The California African American Museum in the heart of Los Angeles, California, recently played host to the Urban Issues Breakfast Forum. The topic of discussion, the color of authority. I'm Michael Reel, and this is ReelUrbanNews.com. Join us as we speak with three panelists: Lisa Bloom, legal expert and author; Carl Douglas, civil rights attorney and celebrity attorney; and retired LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Mr. Douglas, how important is it that we have forums like today?
Mike, there were 100 people at 7:30 on a Friday morning gathered to talk about an issue of community importance. It was a fabulous occasion, and I'm so glad and proud that Mr. Samad asked me to take part. We need to have things like these to discuss issues of concern, because it's only through talking like this will there ever hope to be some change for the better for all of us.
Were you surprised by the comments your fellow panel mates made? You had Cheryl Dorsey, retired LAPD sergeant, who was very, very animated in her dissertation, if you will, about the racism that is a part of LAPD. Were you surprised that she was that open?
No, well, she's no longer a member of the department, so
right.
It's not like that's going to hamper her from being honest. I am not surprised when she talks about the influence that race has on everything that happens in our community, including the police department. Having been a civil rights lawyer for more than 33 years, I know firsthand how racism plays an ugly role in everything that is part of our criminal and civil justice system. So no, her words may have been enlightening to the audience, but it was something all too familiar for me.
Well, let me say this about that. I don't know that the average street cop really thinks that deeply, but what I do know and what I have seen is that officers who are overzealous have no problem manufacturing probable cause. And you understand what probable cause is. That gives an officer a reason to stop you in the first place. And so what happens is that an officer will sometime, in his eagerness to interact with you, will create a situation that's going to cause you to act in such a way that now you're going to be on the back end of what we call a 148 arrest, 415, which is interfering with the police officer. And I mean, that's so generic. Anything, if I don't answer a question, then I'm interfering with his investigation. So once you find that you're in that situation, and now if you have testosterone involved, like you will with a male versus male, now you've got a little scuffle, a little push and shove, and now guess what? You've got a battery on a PO that you're facing. And really, I don't think the officers that have that mindset really much care if the case sticks, because we have tremendous power as police officers. We can take away your liberty, and I don't care if it's just for a weekend. If I put you in jail on Friday and you don't have the financial wherewithal to get out until Monday, guess what? I just took 48 hours out of your life. And it doesn't much matter if you really did what I said you did. It's going to be a DA reject. I understand that. But I've written the report, I've manufactured the probable cause, I presented it to my supervisor, and you've gone to jail for the weekend. And so that's not an uncommon occurrence. And then when these things happen, traditionally in the black community, we don't complain. We don't call because we think nothing is going to happen.
You wrote your book in 8 days.
Yes, I did. The creation of a manifesto, Black and Blue. And I wrote it in 8 days because I was just possessed. You know, I had a story to tell, and I wanted people to know and understand that I don't condone what Christopher Dorner did, but I understand. And so I wanted to tell my story because I had gone through something very similar 15 years earlier. And so I knew when he said what he said about how the police department treated him, I knew it to be true because the department treated me poorly as well.
How important is it for you as a retired officer, now author, to participate in this forum like today?
Well, I think it's important because I let people know what's really going on, because prior to this, There's no one like me. There's no one that's speaking about what goes on internally on the LAPD.
Talk about your book briefly.
My book basically chronicles my 20-year journey on the LAPD.
Lisa Bloom, the legal expert and author, has a new book out, Suspicion Nation. She talked about the Trayvon Martin trial. As a civil rights attorney, when you look back at that trial, were you surprised by the findings?
You know, having heard her talk about some of the things that the prosecution failed to do has really kind of influenced my assessment on the case. When I watched from afar, I thought that there was going to be a verdict in favor of the defendant early on. I remember I had an occasion in February of last year where I had breakfast with Mrs. Martin and her son and their lawyer, Ben Crump and Darrell Parks, who were personal friends of mine. And I was saying then, based on what I knew about the facts of the case, that it was going to be a difficult case for the prosecution simply because there would be no witness, as far as I knew, who saw the initial interaction between Trayvon and Zimmerman, who could say who was the initial aggressor. So his version of what happened would still create a doubt. I think the shooting was a tragedy. I think it was race-based, but I was concerned about the quality of the evidence. Having listened to Ms. Bloom talk, I'm not so sure anymore I'm accurate.
As I said, I was shocked to see that there was very powerful evidence against George Zimmerman that the prosecution was not arguing. And I have the 6 biggest mistakes the prosecution made in this case in my book, Suspicion Nation. But in the interest of time, I'll just give you one now, and that is that George Zimmerman demonstrated very clearly on videotape that his gun was holstered inside his waistband behind him. And he said he was lying on the ground on his back, Trayvon Martin on top of him, knees to elbows, when Trayvon saw the gun, reached for the gun, threatened his life. And at that moment, he says he had no choice but to pull the gun and shoot in self-defense. Well, unless Trayvon Martin had x-ray vision, there is no way he could see through the bulk of George Zimmerman's body to a black matte gun and a black matte holster covered by grass in darkness in the rain. Why the prosecution did not argue that? Well, that was the question that I had. I'm sure Carl will agree that in civil rights cases, you don't often get evidence like that. And if you get it, you should use it. You should argue it. And they didn't. And very similarly, in the Michael Dunn case, how many of you are familiar with Michael Dunn shooting at Jordan Davis in Florida? They call it the loud music murder case. Right. So in that case, Michael Dunn, we know, shot and killed 17-year-old Jordan Davis, also unarmed, shot into a car full of young people. After an argument over loud music, the jury hung on the top charge. Michael Dunn wrote explicitly racist letters from prison. He said, and I quote, "The more I get to know those people," referring to African Americans, "the more prejudiced I am." He said, "More people should shoot and kill young black males because that would eliminate the threat." These are letters written from him, in his handwriting, from prison, not introduced into evidence at his trial by the prosecution, even though the defense introduced character witnesses that said he was gentle and peaceful. Gentle.
Right now you're handling here in Los Angeles, California, another race-based case, if you will. May not be as high profile, but nevertheless it is equally as important. And that's the case with the LA County Superior Court Judge Cunningham and the police department with the UCLA campus police.
Yes.
Bring us up to speed with that case, if you will.
Judge David S. Cunningham III has been a sitting Superior Court judge for 4 years. And November 23rd, 2013, at about 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, Judge Cunningham was coming out of a gym, LA Fitness, on the corner of Wilshire and Gailey in Los Angeles. As he came out, he had to unhook his seatbelt to pay for the parking at the complex. And then he wanted to leave out of the driveway before the arm of the parking garage came down on his car. So, as many of us do, he turns the corner to the right and he's hooking in his seatbelt as he starts driving down Gailey. In the subsequent traffic stop, you overhear on the cameras the dialogue going on between the judge and the officer, and it gets kind of testy. So when he gets out to go find it, the officers yell at him for stepping out of the car. And then, for some reason, they interpret that as an act of aggression, and they rush him, spin him around, and they handcuff him. Eventually, a sergeant comes to the scene. He's a black man, and he orders the officers to unhandcuff the judge and release him. You then hear a private conversation between that sergeant and the officers. And the sergeant asks, "Are you sure you want this battle?" He says again, "Are you sure you want this battle?" He recognized the implications of what was going on by handcuffing a sitting judge.
Sure.
The officer said, "I'm not afraid of any battle," in a snarling, dismissive kind of way. He later said, "I don't care if his first name is Judge," meaning I would have done the same thing anyway. And then he said, anyone else would have been in the station right now, meaning if he had not been a judge, he'd be in jail right now.
Especially as a black man.
Correct.
Another great forum. Talk about your panel.
Well, our panel was invited for the purposes of being able to discuss both from the outside and the inside why we have these occurrences of abuse and aggression in our society.
Are you surprised that in the 21st century we're still seeing basically legal lynchings in the American justice system?
I'm not surprised because, as I explained in the opening, whenever black equality has made a move, we have witnessed a changing in the law to change the culture.
I have a responsibility, and I'm speaking about my responsibility as a number one, first of all, African American citizen of the United States of America. It is my responsibility to be representative of us. We have been a disenfranchised people before the Mayflower got here. I can't think of a greater commitment that I have to representing you and your position and us and our people than I will bring to the LAPD. Wow. That's all I want to say. And I want to echo what Carl said. Please, every time one of these trials happens and they interview the jurors and we go, yeah, but we weren't represented. We weren't represented because we're not serving. And we gotta stop saying, well, we weren't represented. Well, who was that juror? You gotta do it. You have to take on the responsibility. We are having children every day. Every second we are having families. And it's all of our responsibilities to protect each other. And I'm asking you to join us in doing this. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the LAPD. Thank you.